Hello, everyone. My name is Ravi Ramamurthy. I'm a professor of international business at Northeastern University and the founding director of the Center for Emerging Markets. It's my great pleasure to welcome all of you to the Vivek and Vandana Sharma India lecture, this time featuring Vimal Kapur of Honeywell. And I want to thank Pankaj Sharma for introducing me to Vimal. And of course, thank Vimal for graciously accepting our invitation. Pankaj, if you would just introduce Vimal, then we'll get the show on the road.
Of course, of course. So first of all, Vimal, big thank you for you to take the time today, and big thank you on the behalf of everybody at CEM, Center for Emerging Markets and the Northeastern University. And also, Vimal, a very, very big congratulations to you from all of us. This is such an achievement. It's a matter of pride for quite a few of us. I have to admit that. But we also wanted to thank you because you are right now in an extremely busy time, but you still decided to be with us today. So I think it's going to be very, very, we are all very fortunate to have you here. So with that said, Vimal, I'll just hand it over to you and then thank you one more time. And we're looking forward to hear from you.
No, absolutely. And thanks for the opportunity here. Look forward to some good conversation. So the way I thought we'll do it is I'll kind of lay out some, some of the thoughts on Honeywell journey in high growth regions and have a unique experience of being part of the both sides of the fence. When Honeywell started this journey, I was an operating general manager in India at that point of time. So I was on the receiving side of the strategy. And then middle of the decade, I changed my job and I became more of a global manager. So I turned on the kind of sending side. So it's been good learning on how the strategy evolved. So if you can share the chart, I'll just walk through a couple of slides. Probably I'll take about 20 minutes or so, maybe quicker if I can. And then we'll open up for Q&A and we'll go from there. So if you move the first chart there, just quick 1 minute introduction, because some of you may know, some of may not know about Honeywell. We are a 4-segment business supported by a common software enterprise. The 4 segments we serve is aerospace, where we have equipment for aeroplanes, business jets, or passenger airlines. We make many equipment like avionics system in the flight, to engines, to air cooling system, to brakes. And now our business is slowly progressing from traditional planes to unmanned aerial mobility. So that's kind of a very exciting sector for us in aerospace. Largest business, almost 40% of our revenue. The second business is building technologies. We automate buildings. The buildings are not the buildings we work for alone. The buildings are also hospitals and airports and schools and data centers. So this building is all about safety and energy efficiency. We have been in this space for many, many years. The third business is performance materials and technology, primarily plays in energy sector. When you think about energy sector, think about petrochemicals, refining, also think about chemicals. We have play here on process technologies, specialty chemicals, and also we are a major player in automation in the process industry. So that's our third segment. And finally, safety and productivity solutions, as the name suggests, drives solutions which drive productivity for retail sector a lot. E-business has been a big part of drive for this business. And we have a pretty strong portfolio for safety for people, the PPE equipment. So that's kind of a 1 minute rapid fire introduction of Honeywell. Last year revenue was $35 billion. Our operating margin is about 22%, and our market cap depends on a day. I think today is close to $140 billion. It keeps moving up and down. Markets are a bit soft for the last few months, few days. So let's go to the topic we are talking today, which is high growth regions. If you jump to the next chart, we started this journey way back in 2004 when Dave Cote was Honeywell chairman. And Dave ran Honeywell from 2002 to 2016. And he really started the phase where we started focusing on China and India as an incubator for high growth region. We put forward a leader who directly reported to Dave Cote. His name is Shem Tejarathi. He was leader for almost 15 years for high growth regions. We started with a lower revenue. It was actually in millions, not even in billions. We had $300-400 million revenue in China, probably $200 million in India. So it was very small portion of Honeywell. and very little local products. I mean, so it was really starting off the journey, but focusing on two promising high growth regions at that point of time. But at the same time, we also started leveraging India in particular for R&D, and I'll talk more about it separately because that has been a pretty big success story. We really changed the gear in after the financial stress in 2008, after the financial downturn happened. I would really call that as the second phase. We really started scaling our high growth region journey. I think world really globalized a lot by that point of time. People became more comfortable to trade, and there was more free exchange of ideas. And you can see there in the chart, we go much bigger in different high growth regions. We of course kept China and India. We started focusing on ASEAN, Middle East, Turkey, and so on. And really our revenue grew here a lot. I mean, we started having 25-30% revenue of Honeywell by end of 2019 from high growth regions. So it's really became center of our integral part of our business. So from something which was a initiative or something which was we thought is important, not really became central to our business. And big part of that was a much bigger focus on local products. We called it East for East. What it basically means is you cannot grow in these countries by sending the Western products. You really have to think about the customer needs locally and make sure that you're learning from those, you're evolving your products based upon the customer needs there. And that was East for East, local products for the local needs. And $650 million looks small, but starting from nowhere, that was a significant accomplishment for us. And we really started talking about a metric of growing our revenue 2 times the GDP multiple of those regions. And this is a time China was really growing 7 or 8%. And for many years, we grew in China at 15% rate for probably 5 or 6 years in a row when Chinese economy was growing 7 and 8%. In particular, by end of 2019, we nearly had $7.5 billion of Honeywell revenue from high growth regions. So 30% or so, of Honeywell revenue came from there, 25% to be precise. And it really started contributing a big part of our organization. And where we are today is really on the phase post-COVID. And I think we are in a mature phase. We, of course, want to hit now $10 billion mark. I think we can do that probably by 2024. So it's a significant part of our, revenue there. And we'll continue to focus on our local products. One area we are focusing a lot is sustainability, because that's a major mission of Honeywell as a company. We have a lot of offerings in sustainability, and we want to make sure that that sustainability mission is not limited only to United States or Europe. We are expanding in China, India, Middle East with the same lens. And a lot of offerings focus is around sustainability, in the high growth regions. So that gives you a little bit of context of evolution from incubation to scaling to kind of redefine with the new, growth vectors as they exist today. If you move to the next chart, please. These have been our core strategies, which I really talked about. What was different? So what's different? First is local products, East for East. And when we export those products outside those markets, then we call it East to Rest. It means we are re-exporting the products from China to Europe or Latin America, things like that. We also introduced a concept of mass mid segment about incidentally just at the time of COVID. We announced the setup of our new center for mass mid market products in Wuhan, and Wuhan became center of COVID, unfortunately, right at that point of time. But we did continue our strategy. We did set up our mass mid market. Now, what is mass mid market and what's different from East for East? The East for East was segments Honeywell was serving, but we want to have localized product to serve the same segment. We are very familiar with the segment. We are familiar with the customer needs, but we want to make fit for market products. So it was not new markets for Honeywell. Mass mid segment was, we really want to go to new segment, which are mass mid market for China and India, those two countries in particular. We are open to go to segments which Honeywell doesn't play. We are open to try new brands, new go-to-market. And that has been our foray, I would say, since 2021. We are expecting that to become a meaningful part of our business in times to come. So more experimentation, more innovation in our model as we are progressing there. Then we are focusing on emerging market growth vector. What it means is that each of these markets have some specific end markets which are very relevant for them. And we want to make sure that our focus aligns with it. We don't force the US thinking to say, why don't you only do this? We really want to, focus on the local markets, and we can talk examples there. Strategic customer focus with leading companies. We have established key accounts in these markets. We have many large companies have key account programs. It's very common, but we have key accounts in high growth regions. For example, in China, many big companies like Sinopec, for example, is our key account, just to name a point. In India, we'll have key accounts like Reliance. So just many examples like that where, and these are well managed by very senior people with a very structured program. And last but not least, truly understand the government priorities of those countries. Because if you don't do that, you can be off your own and you really don't align with the country needs there. Okay, if you move to the next chart here, I'm going to pivot here and talk about, the evolution I briefly mentioned here on how we have really evolution of our products, local product strategy on innovation from East for East 1.0 to East for East 2.0. Essentially, we evolved on how we think about local products over the many years. And then we really start thinking about East to West, exporting the same products outside the emerging markets. And then we're thinking about mass mid-market segments. So the way to think about it is look at the bottom, evolution of our innovation model. East for East 1.0 was we are on the ground. We are thinking about local products, some tweaks, some local manufacturing, no major moves. East for East 2.0 was much more localized MNC, an MNC which believes in those countries, willing to invest major dollars in R&D, in manufacturing. So just from on the ground, putting your flag to really being there. Then East to West was we are becoming a local competitor now to domestic companies with our local products. So we are exporting our products from one domestic emerging market to another emerging market. So that became that we are the competitor. We are not afraid of local domestic competitors, but we are the domestic competitors. So that was an evolution of that. And finally, we are becoming a global challenger with mass mid-market segments. So it's a evolution of the strategy that how we are really evolving. And you can see some of the metrics on the right-hand side. We really take it very seriously. 14,000 engineers we have for product development in these locations today. And I'll share some details, not only for the product development for these regions, but I also extensively use them for our global product development. I'm not aware any industrial company who has operation of that scale. I mean, software company does have it, but we are an industrial company, and with our scale, this is pretty material number. And if you see the top metric, 30% of our revenue in China and India comes from the local products which were developed in those countries. So 1/3 of the revenue. It means we have come to a point of higher maturity and higher level of innovation, and more than 2,000 patents which are locally generated. So it clearly shows amount of execution we have been able to do successfully here. If you move to the next chart, please. So this is now really, I think many companies talk about using local engineering talent for product development. But look at the dates here. Look at the bottom. When did Honeywell move its R&D to India? 1994. To state that it was fashionable, it was nobody even talked about it at that point of time. This really became a trend after Y2K happened in 2000. People figured India's capability in software and IT, and a lot of people started sourcing work to India for IT work. But we started doing product development in 1994. And then you can see in our journey, we've grown, of course, India into multiple locations. We set up our locations in China, in Czech Republic, in Brno. We have a big location in Mexico. And these were integral part of our global product development, as well as for our domestic market product development. We treat them as part of our operation. These are not, outside our operation. They have product ownership. They have a lot of access to customers locally and globally. And we drive a lot of local innovation, as I talked before. And you can see some of the key locations 6,000 plus employees located in India, Mexico, and Czech Republic, purely for R&D work. So which is pretty substantial by any nature. If you go to the next chart, please. So these are kind of examples of a lot of innovation, but just want to give you a little bit of flavor of kind of things our teams are doing in India and in Mexico and in Brunei and Czech Republic, kind of program they participate. These are not the sidebar. We do not do product development in these locations, which are like afterthought. Our leading edge technologies are being developed in these locations, pretty much with complete ownership. You can see, I talked about autonomous urban air mobility, the cloud connected cockpit. These are some of the major development we are doing in aerospace. You can see in building technologies examples there. In the third bar, you have on sustainability offering, which is a huge focus of Honeywell. Major R&D effort happening in, specifically we have an R&D center in Delhi, in Gurgaon to be particular, for renewable fuels, for hydrogen carrier, for use of plastic for making roads. So a lot of research and development work happening on that. So the message here is that we are not doing activity here. We're really truly leveraging the talent for innovation for our global business. And I think we feel high maturity of this process. Most of the Honeywell Chief Technology Officers come from these organizations because they have such a large scale. Honeywell Chief Technology Officer is from our Bangalore operations, many CTOs of multiple businesses. So it's not only we feel proud about process enablement, which I'm talking about, but also talent enablement it has done, how it has become an integral part of our organization talent in its true spirit. And if you move to the next chart, I think that should be the wrap up here. Big focus on sustainability, as I said. We really are thinking about sustainability drivers of each of the countries, like India heavily focused on renewable powers in a big way. China focusing on reducing carbon emissions. Singapore has more, carbon tax, carbon trading policy, and so on. We need to understand the left-hand side and really start thinking about what offerings we are launching or rolling out in these markets to make ourselves more purposeful for these markets. So, the green fuels, plastic circularity, solutions, energy storage, carbon capture. We have low global warming molecules for refrigerants. I can talk in hours on our technologies here, but that's not the purpose. But I wanted to give you the flavor of how we are repurposing our focus in these countries, around sustainability technologies. So I'm going to pause here. I just wanted to give you the flavor of Honeywell focus, both from a business and from an innovation perspective. I'm going to pause here. As I promised, I'll take about 20 minutes. So I'm on my time. So we'll open up for Q&A, and I hope you have lots of them for me.
Thank you. Thank you, Vimal. Let me get you started on one of the questions that came up in chat. And how do you think about China and India and any differences in the way you think of these two countries? It's clear that you think of China and India as differently than you think of many other emerging markets because of their size. But between these two big ones, how do you think of these two countries?
I think the China market size is much bigger for us from a domestic market perspective. Our domestic business in China is about 3 times or even higher, 3.5 times of our domestic business in India, which is representative of the economy difference of the two countries too, right? They're about, Chinese economy is 5 times the size of Indian economy. So it's kind of representative of what it should be. So China is the largest domestic market. So that's one difference. Clearly, China has a much higher manufacturing footprint for us. That should not be surprising. I mean, so we are representative of the larger strategy many industrial companies have taken. India, on the other hand, has been much lower focus on manufacturing. Our sourcing or manufacturing in India is limited for the domestic market. We just make for local market. We pretty much make everything locally in India, but our exports out are limited. They are more heavily focused there in China. But India is heavily leveraged for its services capability, R&D in particular. And, I talked about that. So I think that's a fundamental difference of higher domestic markets, China versus India, China much more manufacturing, India much more services.
Do you see that changing at all, given the developments in India, for instance, and attempts to get manufacturing and getting companies to invest in India, not just to make in India for India, but for the rest of the world?
Yeah, probably. I think India has a lot of competition to face when India won. I think India has case made based upon its domestic market and scale it creates. So whenever there's a domestic market, India can have an advantage to attract somebody else because you can sell domestically and export it. So it's going to get in proportion of domestic market opportunity. I do believe that there are many other countries which have equally compelling proposition, cost structure, or supply chain ecosystem. And India is facing competition from them and will face competition. So it's not, a cakewalk here. But I do believe that as India is attempting to build more new industry like aerospace and defense, it opens up a new supply chain. So that can change the equation there over a period of time, that our sourcing strategy for aerospace can change when that industry will develop. So I think we'll have to really see the real capability created for us to secure and source from India,
There's also a question about the potential for decoupling between China and the US. Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of talk on that. And there's a related question from someone else on the idea of deglobalization, which is even broader idea that countries are retreating back to their national borders. Any thoughts on either of these, and how do you factor these uncertainties into your strategic planning?
Yeah, those are realities. I think we have to really deal with them on a real-time basis. We were lucky enough to have regional manufacturing models. So we make US for US, Europe for Europe, China for China for most part. Our inter-regional exports are very limited. That's how we always designed it. The reason was being closer to the customer, cycle time, logistics cost, and all that plays a lot in our businesses. So implications for, we are planned for any adverse situations, if they ever occur because of our regional model. We are not heavily biased in any one country. I think the question we really have to work is the very source of supply chain. Few components and products, if they are made only in one location, like chips are made only in Taiwan, as all of us are aware. There is no real solution anyone has because they're not made anywhere else. So there's no resourcing we can do or anybody else can do around that. So I think decoupling, every company will measure its own risks. We will measure our own risks and measure our counter strategy. But at the same time, we have to serve our domestic customer base. We have billions of dollars of business in China. So that's something we have to also consider as part of our decision making. So it's a hard one. Nobody is rushing to any decisions, but we are making some tweaks and adjustment to align to the market realities.
I'm getting swamped with questions in chat here. My head is swimming. Let me switch gears. I'm going to maybe bounce back and forth so we make sure we touch a lot of different areas. Can you say a little bit more about your initiatives in the sustainability field, both in terms of what you do internally to improve your own footprint, carbon footprint, and externally with helping your customers to be more sustainable?
Okay, wow. I can talk about that for 1 hour, but I'll try to give a 5-minute answer on that. Let's talk about how we think about sustainability. I'll talk external and come back to what we are doing it internally in 2 parts. Look, the way we think about energy we think about always in 2 buckets. First, energy efficiency, and then energy transition. Energy efficiency is low-hanging fruit we all must be doing on how to save energy on what we consume. So these are energy saving measures which we should apply. And that's what is and you can save up to 20% in many sectors we serve. So it means why that's important? Because if you save 20%, then your problem of transition is reduced by 20%. So now instead of transitioning 100, you have to transition 80. So step 1 is save energy. There are a lot of measures for that across sectors we serve. Then comes the harder part, the energy transition. The energy transition always have to be thought in two sub buckets: electrification and non-electrification. Electrification, when you do wind and solar power, it does solve problem of using non-fossil fuel for many applications. For starters, now you can produce power not from coal, not from gas, but using wind and solar. That obviously reduces emission. But electrification also is creating new applications where the products which were using fossil fuels don't use fossil fuel anymore, like EV cars. So they are consuming electricity and not using power produced from a coal-fired power plant, or heat pumps which can generate heat or cooling, and you can use heat pumps versus using gas to heat your house or heat your water. So electrification is a big part of solution. Electrification is going to drive a massive amount of change in the energy transition, but it doesn't solve all the problems because there are many sectors which cannot be electrified, and we really need, and they are much more harder problem to solve. So think about air transport. You cannot run a plane on a battery. You can run a car on a battery, but can't run a plane. So what do you do now? The aerospace sector or air transport is about 4% of the emissions in the planet. So you have to do something about it. That's done by technologies, other technologies. That's where sustainable aviation fuel comes, that you need to find methods to produce aviation fuel from non-fossil feed as the feedstock. So we use cooking oil, for example. We use ethanol. We use those kind of products to produce sustainable aviation fuel. Other major use of non-electrification is going to be hydrogen. Hydrogen is going to become big fuel in our life by which we can heat homes, we can cook food, we can hopefully run our trucks with hydrogen. So hydrogen is going to be an important element, and hydrogen can be produced by different methods. We all hear about green hydrogen a lot. That's a technology which has to mature. So that's a big part of energy transition which has to happen. So sustainable aviation fuel has to develop, hydrogen has to develop. And last but not least, there's an important element of carbon capture, because there are many sectors where no solution is available, like if you make ceramic tiles, or you make steel, or you make cement. There is no way to electrify them, and there is no other method to decarbonize them. So now what do you do now? Would we stop making buildings? No, so we need steel. Will we stop making homes? No, so we need cement. So what do you do now? Or you keep emitting? The best solution there is carbon capture. You capture the carbon, and after you capture the carbon, you can sequester it. It means you bury it in the ground. It's safe for 100 years at least. Many companies know how to do that. Or you use CO2 and you convert into a product. So you can convert CO2 into further utilization, and there are technologies for that. So the overarching story, when you start putting the thread, this story is extremely complicated. And that's why energy transition is not easy. If it was a plug that we can go in our homes and change to LED lights and that solves the planet's problem, I'm sure we would have all done it by now. The extent of the problem is so deep and so intertwined that multiple companies are required to invent technologies, and that's what we're working on. Now, everything I said so far, Honeywell has participation in all these segments. We do energy efficiency, we are part of electrification, we are part of hard to decarbonize sectors. So that's kind of the external story. Internal story, we are, our emissions are, 2 million tons equivalent per year. That's pretty large by any standard because we have a lot of manufacturing. We do make chemicals which have a lot of emissions, so we recognize that. We have committed 10% reduction by 2024. We are on a pathway to do that hopefully by end of 23 itself. 50% reduction by 2030 and 100% reduction by 2035. So we have very aggressive targets. Why? Because we are one of the propagand of technology. So we're going to use our own technologies to decarbonize ourselves. We are a doctor, so we don't need a doctor to prescribe us a medicine. So we will eat our own medicine and get healthy as quickly as we can. And that's our path. And we want to go and showcase to wider community and industry and see how we can decarbonize quickly. So sorry for a long answer. This is something I have a big passion for, and I can, as I said, I can speak for 1 hour.
Thank you. I hope we can have you back some other time to speak just on that for a full hour, because I know a lot of people are very interested in that. Switching again to another topic, you spoke about some of the local firms in the large emerging markets like China and India, and how you will be at a point where you can compete with them. Can you speak to the nature of these competitors? How much do they keep you up at night?
I would say, I think, look, any competition, you have to take it seriously. It's a competition, whether it is competition we face globally or competition we face in the local markets. We always took our competition in China in particular extremely seriously. We consider that as a major competitive challenge. And that's why we were always very focused on developing local products. Because if a domestic company can develop a local product which meets the local needs at a price point customers are willing to pay for, why can't we do that? What's the secret sauce they have? We don't have. We are a global company. We have a lot of processes and maturity, so we should be able to do it. So that has been our mantra. That has been our playbook for many years. I would say that taking that frontal approach has taught us a lot. I won't say that we have some superlative success and we have no failure either. I would say we have learned a lot. We have given run for money to domestic competitors, and we are thriving well, and we have a good share of demand in our respective markets. So I think we take it in the true spirit of a competitive market, play in the market, learn more, evolve your products. You can transfer that knowledge in other places and keep evolving your business. So I think it's a healthy part of the business. So, and for most part, we have faced that factor primarily in China, of truly local innovators. Personally, I haven't seen, you have the same Chinese product showing up in ASEAN or Latin America. Yeah, that's or Africa. That's very common. But it's the same origin of some of those Chinese companies which have successfully globalized them. I personally haven't seen much evidence of, in our sectors we operate, that's not true across the board. Other countries, emerging markets, able to create a lot of domestic, scale industrial products. There'll be obvious exceptions, but not in the sectors we play in.
In that context, you may have had more experience and success than many other companies in being able to play in that value segment, or what you call the mid segment. But usually for multinationals starting with premium products, going down is harder and less attractive than local players starting mid-market trying to go up. How have you overcome that challenge?
By delineating those segments of the market, of the businesses from the core business, treat it differently, treat it like a startup or a greenhouse business. Make sure that your margin expectations are aligned to the local market and don't have some unrealistic margin expectations. So I think we have been more pragmatic to think about it, because if we do not apply that pragmatism, the risk we have is then we let those companies have a free run. They can make a lot of money and then become a global competitor. So we understand the consequences of being tardy, and we are not going to let that happen. So we are always going to be ahead in the game. And as you saw in my chart, we want to be a local competitor in these countries.
How do you decide which aspects of your product should be local and which aspects should be global?
Yeah, so I think, look, there are two ways to think about it. we have many offerings, many products lines, which are platforms. Think about an avionics in an airline cockpit. There is no local product. The planes are made in, there are OEMs in France, to US, to Canada, to Brazil. They ship planes to everybody. So I don't have to develop a local product because nature of the product is like that. Or we have some very sophisticated technologies of that nature where platform is global. So it's a global product which we develop considering the requirement of all end markets, and customers have appreciation for that. Then we have other part of our businesses where our products have to meet local codes or local standard or local needs. So essentially the approach we take there is we take an 80-20 approach there, that 80% of the platform is common and 20% is localized, customized, whatever you want to use it. I'll give an example. One of the most popular Honeywell product is smoke detector. If you look up the roof, you have a smoke detector. There's a 40% probability it's Honeywell anywhere in the planet because we have about 40% share of demand. So there's a 40% probability. We have a global platform of that detector, but the codes are different in the United States, in Germany, in China. So we have the same product repurposed for those markets to meet that code, but 80% of the design remains same. So there is a customization required because either the market needs or requirement of the local standards or the price points. That can also be a driver. You have to. So I think there are elements which determine what we really want to tweak for a product based upon the end markets. But bear in mind that we also don't want customization to a point that we create very large amount of SKUs that it becomes now hard to manage for manufacture. Cost to manufacture goes high. You carry too much of inventory. You become into cash flow problem. So it's a careful balance you want to localize at a point that it is purposeful and it gives a right return to the business.
Are there any new verticals or segments you see arising in the future as you look beyond the current portfolio of products?
Yeah, I mean, I think the new energy is creating a lot of new segments, which we have companies like us have to pay attention to. I'll give a couple of examples. I mean, there was not much discussion on PV cells manufacturing for solar panels. Many countries are investing in that. So obviously we want to play in that segment. Gigafactory being set up in US and Europe, more manufacturing of batteries for cars. So that's clearly a new segment for us. Electric vehicles being made, there are manufacturing facilities for that. There's a supply chain for that. So I think naturally, to my earlier discussion on energy transition, that's creating a new set of end markets, new set of, and if we have to serve it, because if we don't, we are going to reduce our served available market. And I find it attractive because these are open spaces. Nobody has any shares. The match started just now. The score is 0-0. And if we do a good job of customer engagement, develop the right products at the right price point, we can have high share. So I think there are a lot of interesting opportunity driven by a couple of areas I mentioned. I should have also mentioned hydrogen. Electrolyzers is a massive innovation which has to happen. There's a lot of electrolyzer OEMs which are emerging. So a lot going on in terms of new markets, specifically driven by energy transition.
Yeah, there's a question about relating to your comment on aligning your strategy with the government's priorities. Can you speak a little bit more to how you do that?
Yeah, so it's, I mean, you have to look at what governments care about, and do you have an offering to meet that standard? And I'll give one or two examples to make my point. Let's think about China. Coal is important for China. China has a lot more coal, and coal is used in China to produce power so far. But clearly, Chinese government fully understand their responsibility for climate change, and they don't want to use coal anymore to produce power. The question is now, what do you do with the coal now? You have it, right? And how do you create new technology to use coal for something more useful which also meets the climate change goals. So we created new technology, which is called coal to chemicals. You can use coal to produce petrochemicals, which we need in our life because our life depends on plastics. So you need to build plastics from some source. So we are repurposing that source of minerals available, natural resources available without any harm to the climate, but producing product which we were otherwise producing using fossil fuel. It's a win-win for climate. It's win for China as an economy. So we solve their problem in a material manner, and they can still use a resource they have while they still want to drive with the climate change. So you have to understand the domestic economy needs. Similar example would be, India has very large amount of ethanol because India is a large sugarcane country. It's close enough to equator, so it has a lot of sugarcane. So what do you do with so much of sugarcane is you can produce a lot of ethanol with sugarcane. Ethanol is a very attractive fuel. You can mix it in gasoline, and that your car and your trucks will still work. Or you can also use ethanol to produce a sustainable aviation fuel. That's possible. So we are working a policy with the Indian government. How do we do that? So you have to understand the drivers of that country. You cannot randomly say, I have X, why don't you buy it? I mean, they may not, because it may not work into their strategy. And the strategies, one thing unique about energy transition problems is that the strategy of each country is different. Why? Because their sources of energy are different. Naturally, some countries are more biased to coal, some are more biased to gas, some are more biased to nuclear power, some have a lot of renewable power. So, and they have therefore different ways to go forward in the energy transition. So if you don't understand that, you cannot randomly say that, okay, we got these 5 things, why don't you do it? They're not going to do it because it doesn't fit into their economic model.
Yeah. Honeywell seems to leverage the high growth regions differently than others. What leadership and culture changes were needed to tie executives to look at these markets differently?
Oh, big focus by, our first, our CEO I mentioned, Dave Cody, was Honeywell CEO from 2002 to 2016. He made us a big focus. There was a clear organization structure. There was a clear measurement system. So this was not a sidebar. So if organizations have to drive this level of seriousness, this level of purposefulness, it has to have a leadership commitment. It needs to have clear and consistent process. And I think without that, it's hard. Just by saying it, no process changes. So it requires much more committed leadership commitment and measurement system and investments. We invested a lot of ahead of time and a lot of things I talked about. Otherwise, you can keep talking, but if it is not supplemented by investment, then it's not going to change.
Can you say anything about Honeywell's views of some of the other high growth or high potential regions like Africa and Latin America?
No, we are very big in Latin America. We have we of course use Mexico a lot for manufacturing, like most US companies use it. So we have very strong presence in Juarez. I think we have 7 manufacturing facilities there. From a domestic business perspective, we have pretty strong business in Chile, in Colombia, in Brazil, in Mexico. So it's a pretty attractive market. I think the only where, from a domestic business perspective, economies of scale start becoming problem in many of these regions, because now when you say Latin America, Latin America is not a country. It is not even an economic union. It's set of countries which have a different currency, different custom rules, different legal requirements. So to create economies of scale does become difficult. And that's where, and that applies to ASEAN, which at least have a custom union. So there's a lot more product movement more freely there. But regions like ASEAN, Latin America, or Eastern Europe lack scale compared to the scale which exists in China or India. So it's just like, I think it's relative. Africa is even more fragmented because there's multiple countries. The economic size of each country is much more smaller. So I don't think that it's a lack of focus. It's just lack of scale for us to have a material presence in some of these locations. You know, we cannot be literally present every place in the planet. It's not going to be feasible.
In that context, if I can ask a somewhat speculative question, does your appointment as a CEO starting in June say anything about Honeywell's commitment to emerging markets? Or
look, Honeywell has been committed in emerging markets since 2002. So for us, this is our DNA. I mean, this is the natural process. So I don't expect we are going to make some 180-degree turn. We are doing well. I think we continue to refine our strategy. So we will refine it. We may have to make some tweaks, but I mean, I don't expect that we're going to have a materially different approach to what we are doing today.
What do you see the outlook for growth in the emerging economies going forward? You know, by some estimates, the golden decade for the emerging markets is behind us when they were all doing extremely well. China has slowed down considerably. We don't know if India will take its place and how long that might take. How do you see the future of the emerging markets?
It depends on whom you ask the question, because we have to look the question in Honeywell with the lens of markets we serve. So for us, GDP growth is an interesting statistics, but it may not matter to us because the sectors we serve are different. I'll give one example. Let's take case of Saudi Arabia. I think typical economic growth of Saudi Arabia is 4 to 5%, typically closer to 5%, if I recall top of my memory. But for Honeywell, it's a very attractive market, and we target a growth of 15 to 20% in that market. We say, why? How can you do so well? Because if you see the Saudi economy, they're trying to do three big things. They are a big oil and gas economy, which is one of our verticals. They are investing big in infrastructure so that they can become an economy outside oil and gas. So they're building airports, they're building hospitals, and so on. That's a big vertical for us because they're a building automation company. And they want to be very big in aviation. Some of you noticed this announced a new airline. They want to defense manufacturing. Guess what? We have aerospace as our business. So their economic fit with our vectors is very high. So while they may headline growth be 5, for us, it's 3x because what they do is what we do. So the answer at a headline can be a bit confusing. Some other economy, if their growth is coming more from services oriented, then it may be less relevant for us. So I don't think that there's any black and white answer to these. I mean, we do expect that we can get double-digit growth in emerging markets because of the portfolio we have is more relevant for them, you know, because we serve, when in nation building is happening, we have a lot of relevant offerings in that space. And as these countries are developing, I think we still have a lot to offer them, and therefore we have entitlement for higher growth.
But you anticipate the growth in these markets will continue to be higher than it is in the US?
Yeah, we expect 2x. So we expect our high growth regions growth to be about 10%, while our global growth, we expect more like 5. So that kind of gives you order of magnitude of the difference.
Okay. A question from a student asking, what use cases is Honeywell targeting with blockchain?
Limited, I think, at this point of time. Honeywell is investing a lot in quantum computing. We are one of the lead investors. We have our own company called Continuum, which is, we have invested heavily. We believe that is a bigger opportunity for the planet to solve the problems which have not been solved so far, either to bring more cybersecurity solution with better encryption, inventing new molecules, things of that nature. Blockchain, we are a consumer and user of blockchain. I mean, we do use in some applications, but so far, nothing so material which has a big impact on our business so far.
What are some of the big disruptive forces that you worry about coming down the pike as you look to the future? Are there any you've talked about some really big ones already, like climate change and so on. energy transition and all that. Any others that you see coming that you think are going to mark the beginning of a new era?
I think this is a broader question, and the answer, there could be a broader answer which is more generic. There could be answers specific to what we do. If I give a generic answer, clearly longer life of human being is aspiration of everybody. It means that there's going to be more spent around anything to do with medical care, pharmaceutical, more drugs, human health. But for most part, we have a limited presence in that segment. So there's nothing much we are going to benefit from that. But if I talk specifically for Honeywell, the portfolio, which I briefly talked about in the front end, the two things which we really care about is climate change and labor skill shortage. Because the people, less skilled people are available in the world, which creates its own consequences on industrial workers, people productivity, and therefore digital transformation become necessary because you want to do more with less. And that's something very, very relevant for us. And the second, which I talked about earlier, is climate change. Probably in my view, it's the biggest problem our generation, and specifically the students on the call, is in front of us in next 25 to 50 years. Hopefully it's not 50 years. It's probably lower, 30 years, 40 years. It's a massive problem because the way to think about it is that current energy infrastructure, what we consume today, was created in 100 years, somewhere from 1910 to 2010. We want to undo that in 25 years. So 4 times the speed you want to do what you did in 100 years. It's hard because energy demand is also increasing. Nobody wants to, how many of us want to switch off the lights, not use hot water, not use air conditioning? Nobody's going to raise hands. So we all want to consume more energy, but we also want it to be green. Okay, it's a hard problem to solve. How will we solve the problem? Requires a lot of creativity and innovation. And consequences of not doing that, we can already see it. We can see all kind of weather patterns. So there's only so much denial we can live in. I mean, I think the reality is in front of us. And so from Honeywell perspective, we really focus on those two broad, macros which we really care about.
The question here about the battery supply chain in the US, which US lacks. How do you see that changing and evolving, and what role do you think Honeywell might play in that process?
Yeah, it's a major challenge. I think rebuilding supply chain for battery manufacturing is probably one of the top challenges of energy transition, as I mentioned before. I mean, you want to make a lot of EV cars, that's a good news, but they need batteries. We don't make batteries in the US. That's the reality. And we need to have manufacturing capacity. But biggest challenge there is, how do you make electrolyte, which makes the battery work? And we don't have technology in electrolyte. That's where Honeywell comes in. We play in that segment. We are looking at methods to develop that technology and commercialize it so that we have a domestic production and consumption in battery manufacturing. So there's a lot of work required to turn that technology from ideation or in the research phase to the commercial phase.
We're approaching the end of the session. I'm going to ask you a personal question and then give you a minute or two to share any concluding thoughts. You started from, graduated from engineering school and joined Honeywell in India. Was that your first job?
It was my third job. This was my job, 3 jobs in first 3 years. So I guess most of us are confused when we start working. It took me 3 years to figure it out what I want to do.
I see. And then you've had a meteoric rise within this global company. Can you share with us what that journey was like and any reflections on that experience?
I would say, when I joined Honeywell in '89, I didn't think that, I will grow into the senior leadership roles all the way to, potentially CEO coming up in next few months. Nobody can plan the career like 30, 40-year horizon. If you're doing that, you're naive. Let's be very blunt. I think I was pretty lucky to have lot of right career opportunities provided by Honeywell, coupled by good managers, good leaders to support me. I think if you have the recipe, you will win. You need good jobs so that you can learn. And I learned through different roles in the company. And then I was lucky to have great mentors who developed me as a human being and as a professional. And I just kept improving with every job. So I think that's a combination which really helped me in Honeywell.
And what are some of the things you learned as you went along that you didn't know in the beginning?
I think it's for most part, it's all about leadership. How do you do problem solving? I think what really matters is, as a professional, eye for detail matters a lot. So if you wash off things at a high level, that's not a good idea. I think at any role you perform, you need to have a lot of eye for detail. And the second thing is bias for action. You need to do something. Making any problem look a long-term problem, it'll take 2 years to solve. That time is over. Things have to be done in a matter of days and hours. Bias for action is critical. And it's the fundamental principle I follow. Understand the problem deep enough. So eye to detail is critical. And then do something, split the task into weeks and months, not into years. And that's been something I learned over a period of time. And I practice that every day.
And is it frustrating as you get higher up in the organization that things move more slowly than you could when you were managing your own smaller units?
Not really. I think it's my job to move the organization at a pace we want it. I mean, I think organizations can move at a fast pace. How do you run a big company with the speed of a small company is a trick you have to do. And that's what, we all have to learn. If you can perfect that, then you get best of both the worlds. You get the brand, the global presence, the financial muscle of a big company. You couple that with the speed and agility of a small company. And if you can crack the code of the two, then you'll be a winner.
I think someone called it teaching elephants how to dance.
Yeah.
So do we have any final concluding thoughts? We have about a minute left.
No, absolutely. It's a pleasure for opportunity here. I think it was a great opportunity, great set of questions. Really appreciate that. I hope I enjoyed a lot. I hope there was some benefit of my conversation to everybody in the call, and look forward to see you some of you soon. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Vimal. We hope to host you in person when you come to Boston sometime. Thank you so much, and we wish you all the best, and appreciate very much your candid comments this evening. And we'll see you in a short while in the other session.
Sure. Yeah,
thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all for attending.
Bye-bye.
And we'll see you at our next event. Thank you.